How's it going, guys? So I had to do a little bit of a music review here because I did a video about 6 years ago called Metalheads Suck, and it was something I meant every word of. Now, you might be saying, well, Brett, you listen to metal music. You're a metalhead yourself. I listen to other different types of music, but I need to kind of expand on that with this album review. And I talked about a band in that video. I talked about how everybody, who's into metal is like a gatekeeper, and they, feel the need to like hate on somebody who doesn't like a certain band. There's a lot of bands like that. Limp Bizkit, In Flames, a band that, Metallica even, a band changes their style, experiments a little bit, they are automatically considered a sellout, or they're not good anymore. People just want to hear the same type of album over and over again, and maybe I'm guilty of that notion. Maybe I'm the person I was talking about in Metalheads Suck, because when it comes to an album like A House on Fire, like A House on Fire, I guess that would be the right way of saying that. That sounds kind of odd, but you get it. I talked about this band, Asking Alexandria, and I said, this is a band that's great. At that time they only had 3 albums out, but I said this is a band that I really like. And, it was a band that for a long time I stayed away from because people would make fun of them and they'd say, oh, these guys, they're posers, they're not real metal. It's kind of like when you think about it, what is real metal? What do they mean by that? When a metalhead says it's not real metal, it just means that they don't like it. It's not their style, but your style could be different than my style. And, I thought that those 3 albums from Asking Alexandria, those first 3 albums, they were amazing albums. They were great albums. They were fantastic metalcore albums. And I'm a big fan of metalcore. I like a lot of metalcore bands. And those were, I gotta say, those are like 3 of my favorite metalcore albums of all time. They're just some really strong ones. They're right up there with the Killswitch Engage albums, and they're up there with like a few others. I can't really think off the top of my head, but they're really good. And I fell in love with them when I saw them at Mayhem Fest in 2014. Which it's really strange because Danny Worsnop would leave the band, I believe, the same year, and I was really disappointed. I'm like, I'm just getting into this band. I'm really starting to love Danny as the lead singer, and all of a sudden, he's just leaving the band just like that. They got a new singer. They released, and this was actually a guy that would do covers on YouTube of their songs, so that was pretty cool. But the guy was just not as good. So they kind of did something that was a little bit effed up. Danny decided to get back into the band. He was in the band called We Are Harlot. Actually, you would hear We Are Harlot during the bumper music when they would go to a commercial and advertise a match on Raw that was coming up. So if anyone didn't know who We Are Harlot is, if you watched Raw during 2012, you would have heard Danny Worsnop's vocals. But that album was okay. This was not Asking Alexandria. I listened to the album. I think I might have enjoyed it the first listen due to Danny's vocals, but I only really listened to the one song that was featured on Raw. Probably because of the connection it had to Raw and the connection that it had to Danny Worsnop, and it made me long for more Asking Alexandria songs and albums. So with that in mind, he finally came back in 2016, and he came back at a time when I actually had tickets to an Asking Alexandria concert, and I thought it was going to be the other guy that replaced him on that album, The Black. And so what was effed up is they dumped that guy, and then they put Danny Worsnop back in the band. And, I actually really didn't care, because I was like, Danny's back. So I watched the concert. It was a great concert. It was lots of fans going crazy, even though it was in a small venue, you know, in Manhattan. And, you know, people were really happy to see Danny back. I was happy. And then they announced that they were going to start work on a new album. And they did that. And they got the album out. And it came out. And it came out in 2017. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, it came out like 2017, 2018, and I was really just kind of disappointed with it. It wasn't, oh, actually, I'm checking. Yeah, it was 2017. I've got it right up here on my screen. So it came out in 2017, and that was pretty cool because The Black had just come out a year earlier. So this was kind of like an apology to fans because I think certain people like The Black, or they kind of forced themselves to like The Black. A lot of fans right away said, screw The Black. It wasn't the song, you know, it wasn't the album that they were looking for. So that album came out with Danny Worsnop, and it was just self-titled. And right there, you always know when something's self-titled, they're going to change it up. Like with the Black Album or Metallica. But, you know, that's an exception right there. That's a great album. Some people say it's a terrible album. It depends on which Metallica fan you ask. It's a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. But the Asking Alexandria self-titled album was far from a masterpiece. It was a lot of just hard rock songs. I even struggle to say that they were hard rock. It was pretty light. The metalcore was completely gone. It was totally out of there. And I was like, okay, these guys are experimenting, but most of the fans are not happy with this. I would say a great majority of the fans. Of course, there's always a vocal minority. You know, the people that liked the album probably just didn't care enough to comment. But most people had a negative response to it. But if you look on their Spotify, like, those were their top songs. So I gotta say that I guess it's doing pretty well. You know, and still to this day, if you look, I know a lot of people liked, you know, Into the Fire. There was a lot of, you know, praise around that song. So I guess maybe it's more the, you know, those were comments I did see that were positive. People really liked that song. So now they decided to release another album that's different, a little different than the other one, but it kind of expands upon the fact that we're not getting metalcore from these guys anymore. So like a House on Fire, these guys just come back. They put out an album, and then I kind of realized what was missing. It was not the shift, because here's the thing with all, you know, the artists that change their styles, right? Metallica, In Flames, the ones that everyone complains about. Suicide Silence is another one that people, I think, hated ever since the first album, but they also changed their style. But all these bands, they all kept the energy going, which was the thing that a lot of these bands that I like always have, which I always love in a band. Energy, melodic vocals. It doesn't always have to be so melodic, but energy and attitude. You gotta have those or you're gonna totally lose me. You know, you gotta have the energy. You gotta like, if you sound disinterested in a song when you're singing it, you're performing it, you're in this band and you're not like happy to be there, you're not expressing like any type of passion through the vocals or through the playing, then you're gonna lose me. And that's what happened when I listened to this album. It was a lot like the last album that they had, the self-titled one. Now, the self-titled album, I listened to it twice. And sometimes with certain albums, if I give it a second go, I might enjoy it. Kind of like with the Suicide Silence self-titled album. I went back and I listened to it. It wasn't as bad. It wasn't a fantastic album, but it wasn't as bad as I first remembered it. Because sometimes, I'd said this in the past, your ears are not ready to hear what you're going to hear. But this time, I remember like I listened to that one and I wasn't like really suffering too much. No, on this album, I kind of felt like I was suffering. I kind of am thinking about it. I was saying it's okay, but I was not really enjoying this. I wanted to listen to the whole thing because I'm a fan of these guys. I'm a fan of Danny. I'm a fan of Bruce on guitar. I like the riffs they've written in the past. I love the melodies that they've written in the past. And the thing I need to really ask is, okay, so we want to do rock songs. Okay, so why can't we do a song like Moving On from their third album? Right? Like why can't we do that? Why can't we have a song that's similar to that one? Because that still kind of gives that old school kind of feel. From Death to Destiny. I had to kind of just look at the name of the album there for a minute. Yeah, Moving On is probably one of the best tracks on that album. And there is definitely a difference from Death to Destiny. You know, Bruce complained, I remember, he said in an interview that Danny did not want to, you know, do any more screamed vocals. And you got to think about it. There wasn't as much screaming as there was on Reckless and Relentless. But I have to say, I think, like, out of all the albums, I think From Death to Destiny is my first. Because a lot of times they find this perfect balance. And they stick with it. And this was good. I was like, yeah, if they're going to have a fourth album, when Danny came back, I was like, yeah, we're going to hear more of Moving On. We're going to hear more of the style. And then they just completely, like, no, we're rock. Like, okay, you could at least say from In Flames and Metallica, like, those guys stayed metal. You know, they might have changed their style, maybe incorporated elements from different genres. But no, these guys, they completely left the genre. Like, to me, you know, metal and rock are like brothers and sisters. They really are. Like, they're fused together. There's even many debates on where does hard rock end and where does metal begin, right? That's the whole thing. That's the problem with Nickelback, for example. They're hard rock, according to me, and I'm a fan of them as well. So, you know, hate on me all you want for that. But, okay, I'm listening to this album. And I hear, like, some attempts at metal. Like, you know, like, kind of like, they're like, hey, you know, hey, guys, we still have a little something in us, you know. And I hear that kind of on Anti-Socialist and The Violence. And maybe, like, certain parts of other songs. But I'm listening to this, and there's no good riffs. There's no good melodies. There's no attitude. Danny, quite frankly, sounds kind of bored. So he sounded like he was having the time of his life on those first three albums. But he sounds even more bored on this than the last one. And he actually sounded like he was having even more fun when he was in We Are Harlot. So I need to ask the question. It's very telling with a vocalist if he sounds uninspired. Why is he doing this style if he sounds like this? He's obviously not really enjoying himself because you can hear it. You can hear it reflecting the work. There's no emotion. The thing about Danny that a lot of people didn't understand is his ability. What he showed on From Death to Destiny, the range of this man. He's a tremendous vocalist that doesn't get enough credit. I will never forget hearing him in concert at that Mayhem Fest and hearing him vocalize on Moving On. Like, that is like the talent of Danny Worsnop. And, you know, this guy, like, bad reputation, maybe his behavior outside of, you know, performing, it makes him unpopular, whatever you might want to say. But this guy is a true artist. Or at least he used to be. I don't know. He's lacking inspiration. Like, I don't get it. There was so much excitement. You would have thought that the roar from the crowd, the acceptance of having Danny back in the band, this was going to be the time for this band to, like, have that second chapter. You know, forget about losing him as a vocalist. Keep, you know, moving on, you know, to the future and keep producing more great albums. But that's not the case. This album was so boring. It was like, you know, I kept looking at my phone and saying, like, okay, you know, is this album almost over yet? Like, I wanted to listen to the whole thing because I wasn't really even planning on doing a review on it. I was like, you know, it was kind of in the back of my mind. Do I want to review this? Do I not? You know, because I'm kind of like more trying to focus on gaming content here on this channel. You know, and taking a break from wrestling and all that. But I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to talk about this because I like this band. And I'm like, okay, am I just not being accepting of this style, that maybe this is Danny's artistic hunger, that he wants to just move on from the metalcore. And I always hate this. I hate when they say like, oh, a band matured. Like, to me, that just, that's like keyword for like selling out. Oh, the band matured. Like, if a band wants to do a style of music where it's attitude filled and everything, I notice a lot of like music media, like a lot of these magazines and stuff, and fans had so much of a problem with them using certain language in songs. Like, when did metal lose like its attitude? Like, they're like, oh, it's so immature. Like, okay, like certain bands didn't say things, that might have been taken as offensive in the past. Like we're seeing around the music, like, this is when music becomes boring, because I think that's part of the thing. They kept getting hit with, oh, you shouldn't be saying this in the song, oh, you shouldn't be talking about that in the song, and now this music sounds so sterilized, it sounds so safe, and it just is boring. It's really boring to me. Like, and I saw a lot of people, on the Asking Alexandria Instagram, people were saying like, where's that old music from you? Where's the metalcore? Where's that attitude? Because that's what it is. It's supposed to be a fusion of metal and punk. So, that attitude comes from both of those great genres. And all of that's lost. And of course, I mean, I've been one of these people defending the band, saying, hey, and people were saying like, oh, they don't even realize that this is, like how you've always sounded. Things haven't changed. Like, no, there's a pretty big difference here. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, In Flames sounds a lot different than when they first started. But I like it, and I think it was a good change. And I enjoy that change. Same thing with Suicide Silence. They've kind of dialed back the deathcore sound just a tad bit. And they've kind of found a happy medium. They've kind of gone a little bit more on the last album, but here with Asking Alexandria, like, they've jumped the shark. They've completely just, maybe for some people, they jumped over the shark and went into the correct waters. And for people like me, no, they've kind of just, gotten completely ridiculous. They've gone too far. I don't know what they're trying to do, if they want to be more radio friendly. I think that's what it has to do with. I think that they don't want to have that image anymore. They kind of want to be a more proper rock band. But, I mean, they're just completely saying to their fans, like, hey, you liked our old stuff? Well, get used to us being a completely different band. Like, doesn't this torture Ben Bruce? Like, doesn't this guy, like, want to, just totally, like, put out a great, like, bunch of riffs? Doesn't he miss those times of just having those great, punishing riffs? Like, no. And doesn't Danny miss, like, all the different vocal ranges? Because he, like, okay, he yells a little bit in here, but it's kind of more like a yip, like from just a injured puppy. Like, it's, what's going on here? I miss the band that I had. Like, I'm saying, I'm not trying to sell myself as, like, being this big open-minded music guy. Like, trust me, there's a lot of different types of music that I just, don't want to have any business with. But, I usually try to tell people, like, a band has the right to experiment. Does Asking Alexandria have the right to experiment? Of course they do. But this stinks. This is not good. I don't like it. And I was very, very disappointed. I've been disappointed 2 times in a row. This is actually worse than the last album. So, I mean, I listened to it on Spotify. I can't say I spent any money on the album, so how much can I really complain? Imagine if this was, back in the 90s, and I went to the Wall, or I went to Coconuts or something like that, or Sam Goody, and I bought the album for $20. I'd be pissed. I'd be like, alright, I just spent money on just, stuff that I just didn't enjoy, that I'm not going to listen to again. And I'm not going to listen to this album again, because like I said, I've been looking at my phone. I couldn't wait to go and listen to another album. And you know what I was listening to today? I was listening to, what is it called again? So hard to say, Reckless and Relentless. Their second album. And I'm just like, oh man, so good. I'm listening to Somebody Somewhere, and just like, oh man, and Closure, all these great songs from them, and I'm just thinking back to that album, and I'm kind of doing that Arthur meme thing with the fist, just like, it's like, why would they do this to themselves? I don't get it. I don't know, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you've listened to the album and you're an Asking Alexandria fan, do you think this is a step in the right direction? 'Cause I don't think so, but maybe you think so. I don't know. Anyway, guys, thank you all for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell so you get all notifications when I post all my new videos. I want to thank all my patrons, and guys, I'll see you next time.